Ever get that feeling, when you're trying to get a new business idea off the ground, or maybe just understand a new market?
Yeah, it can feel like you're just lost in the fog sometimes.
Totally. Overwhelming, right? Just figuring out where to even begin.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's why today we're going to be digging into market research and try thinking of it less like homework and more like your secret weapon for clarity.
Exactly. We've been looking at this really helpful article, How to Build a Successful Market Research Strategy for Startups. It's by Swasti Dharmadhikari, published on Cognitive Market Research.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is pretty simple. Pull out the essentials, the core stuff you need to know from this material.
We want to help you, the learner, cut through the noise and really grasp what market research means for a new venture, giving you that confidence boost.
Okay, so let's kick things off. What is market research, according to the article?
Well, it defines it as basically collecting, analyzing, and then interpreting data
Data about what specifically?
about a market, its different parts or segments, who the competition is, the wider industry, that kind of thing.
But the key purpose, the real why behind it all.
It's about understanding what customers actually need and prefer. It helps you spot strategies that work and maybe find some opportunities you hadn't seen before.
And the article mentions there are different ways to go about this, right? Not just one method.
Yeah, exactly. It breaks it down into two main types, primary and secondary research.
Okay, so primary is.
That's when you go out and get the data yourself, directly. Think surveys, interviews, maybe focus groups.
Or even just watching how people behave.
Right, observing consumers. It gives you those real-time insights.
And secondary.
That's using data that's already out there. So industry reports, academic studies, government stats.
Even looking at competitor websites, I guess.
Definitely. Competitor websites are a goldmine sometimes. The point the article makes is that you often need both primary and secondary to get the full picture.
Makes sense. It gives you different perspectives.
And it's really interesting to see how big companies use this stuff. The article gives some good examples.
Like Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb. They
Mm.
really dove into qualitative research, surveys, interviews, focus groups. They wanted to get beyond just, do you want to bet?
Uh-huh. They wanted to understand the why.
Exactly. The emotional side of travel, the desire for local experiences, that led them to things like experiences and those long-term stays. It wasn't just about basic accommodation.
That's a great example. And Tesla, different approach.
Very data-driven. The article highlights their focus on customer feedback using advanced analytics.
So constantly looking at surveys, reviews.
Market segmentation, yeah.
Yeah.
They use it to stay ahead in the EV market, trying to figure out not just what people want now, but what they will want,
Pushing the boundaries.
for sure. And then there's Spotify.
Ah, yes. We probably all contribute to their research daily.
Pretty much, they're constantly analyzing listening habits, that huge amount of user data.
Plus surveys and asking for feedback, too.
Right. And that's how they nail those personalized recommendations and keep growing, keep us hooked.
Okay, so these examples show it works for established players. But why is market research so crucial for startups specifically?
Well, the article really lays it out. First off, it's about understanding the landscape you're stepping into.
Knowing your customers, their needs, preferences, how they buy stuff.
Exactly. It's fundamental for achieving what people call product market fit.
Let's unpack that phrase a bit. Product market fit. What does that really mean for someone starting out?
Good question. It essentially means you found a real need in the market, and your product or service actually meets that need for a good number of people.
People who are willing to pay for it.
Right. Market research helps you figure out if that demand is actually there before you pour tons of time and money into building something nobody wants. It cuts down that risk.
Huge risk reduction. And it's not just about the customer side, is it? It's also about the competition.
Absolutely. You need those competitive insights. Research helps you see what others are doing well, where their weaknesses might be.
And where the gaps are, the opportunities for you.
Yeah, so you can figure out your unique selling point, your unique value proposition. Without that, you might just jump into a crowded market or miss a chance to stand out.
Makes sense. And pricing, that's always tricky for startups.
Definitely. The article points out how research helps here, especially when resources are tight. It helps you figure out what customers are actually willing to pay.
So it's not just guesswork.
No, it's informed decision-making based on what the market will bear, what competitors charge, that kind of thing.
And all this information customer needs, competition, pricing it, feeds directly into your marketing and sales, right?
Precisely. Research tells you where to reach your potential customers most effectively and what messages will actually resonate with them. Takes away a lot of that early guesswork.
Okay, so we know why it's important. How does a startup actually build a market research strategy? Where do you start?
Well, the article reiterates the definition we talked about, gathering, analyzing, interpreting data. But the core message for startups is that this process guides everything.
Product development, pricing, marketing.
Yeah, all those big decisions. It's about minimizing risk through informed choices.
And the absolute first step, according to the article.
Setting clear objectives. You need to know what you want to find out.
Right, otherwise you're just collecting data randomly.
Exactly. Clear objectives, focus your efforts. The article gives some common examples for startups.
Like identifying target customers.
Yep, getting really specific demographics, behaviors, preferences, and competitor analysis is another big
Yeah,
one.
where are they? What are their strengths, weaknesses? Where's your niche?
Uh-huh. Also, understanding market trends, what's happening now, what might happen next.
And that crucial product market fit we mentioned, does your idea actually solve a real problem?
And finally, figuring out that pricing strategy, what's optimal based on your audience, competitors, demand. Clear objectives are the foundation.
Okay, let's zoom in on the target audience piece. The article stresses how vital this is.
Absolutely critical. Effective research really hinges on knowing your ideal customer inside and out. This is where market segmentation comes in.
Segmentation.
Yeah.
Breaking down the market. Right.
Yeah, dividing the broad market into smaller, more manageable groups who share similar characteristics. The article mentions 4 key ways to segment.
Okay, what are they?
First, demographics. That's the basic stuff. Age, gender, income, education, job.
Got it. The quantifiable facts.
Then, psychographics.
Eh.
This goes a bit deeper. Values, lifestyle, interests, attitudes, behaviors, sort of the why behind their choices.
Interesting. What's next?
Geographics. Pretty straightforward. Where are they? Urban, rural, specific regions, countries. Location matters.
Mm-hmm. And the last one?
Behavioral segmentation. This looks at their actions, past purchases, brand loyalty, how often they use a product or service.
So purchase patterns and usage.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that once you understand these segments, you can tailor everything, your research questions, your marketing messages, your product features, your sales approach much more effectively for each group.
Makes sense. It allows for precision. Okay, moving on to competition analysis. Why is looking at competitors so important again?
Well, it reveals both opportunities and threats, essentially. It helps you see where you can fit in, maybe find unmet needs, but also what challenges you might face.
So after figuring out the customer, you figure out who else is trying to reach them.
Precisely. And the article distinguishes between 2 main types.
Direct competitors.
Yeah, the ones selling basically the same thing to the same audience. Your obvious rivals.
And indirect.
Those offering different solutions but solving the same core problem for the customer. Maybe a different technology or a completely different approach.
Right, the alternatives.
And this is where something like a SWOT analysis comes in handy, as the article mentions.
SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
Exactly. It's a framework to analyze your competitors systematically, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities they might have, and the threats they face.
How does that help a startup?
It helps you pinpoint where you might have an advantage, maybe leverage your strengths against their weaknesses, or spot opportunities they're missing.
Got it. And market share. Why does that matter?
You need to understand who the big fish are, right? Who dominates the market currently? Understanding their influence gives you a sense of the power dynamics you're entering.
Okay, so we know the what and the why. How do we actually gather these insights? The article circles back to those primary methods here.
Right. It connects the strategy back to the practical tools, like surveys, great for quantitative data from lots of people.
Measuring satisfaction, preferences, demand.
Yeah. And the article even mentions accessible tools like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, so it doesn't have to be super complex or expensive.
Good point. What about getting deeper insights?
That's where interviews come in. One-on-one conversations to really understand the why, the needs, the problems, the motivations.
Can be face-to-face, phone, video calls.
Sure, they provide that rich, qualitative data.
And focus groups.
Small group discussions. Really useful for getting direct feedback on, say, product ideas, concepts, maybe even marketing messages before you launch them wide.
So a way to test the waters with a representative group.
Exactly. Get those initial reactions, find potential issues early on.
Okay, so you've done your surveys, your interviews, maybe some focus groups, gathered secondary data. Now you have a pile of information. What next?
Analysis. This is crucial. The article stresses that raw data itself isn't that helpful. We need to turn it into actionable insights.
Making sense of it all, but you have to be careful here, right? Like not confusing correlation with causation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a classic trap.
Yeah.
Just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other. Good analysis looks for confirmation across different data points.
So how do you start analyzing? What techniques does the article suggest?
One basic thing is just looking for patterns, recurring themes, common answers, consistent behaviors. These can point to pain points or maybe areas for improvement.
Spotting the trends in the noise.
Yeah. And then, going back to segmentation, analyze the data based on those different customer groups you identified.
To see if different segments have unique needs or preferences.
Exactly. It lets you fine-tune your approach for each group. More precise marketing, better positioning.
Smart. Anything else?
Cross-checking your data. Compare what you found in your primary research, surveys, interviews, with your secondary research, reports, articles.
To see if they align.
Right. If different sources point to the same conclusion, you can be much more confident in your findings. Build credibility.
And are there tools to help with this, especially with lots of data?
Definitely. The article mentions things like Google Analytics, Tableau, even trusty Excel. These can help you process large data sets, visualize trends with charts and graphs.
Makes it easier to understand and share the findings.
For sure. Much easier than staring at a huge spreadsheet.
Okay, there's one final, really important angle the article covers. Attracting investors. How does market research play into that?
Hugely important.
Here.
Investors are looking for opportunities, yes, but they're also looking to minimize risk. They want businesses that understand their market and have a solid plan.
So good market research basically builds investor confidence. How?
Well, think about it. If you can show investors a business plan backed by solid research data on market trends, customer behavior, competitor analysis, industry dynamics.
It shows you've done your homework.
Exactly. It demonstrates thoroughness, reduces their perceived risk. It shows you truly understand the target market and customer needs.
And it helps quantify the opportunity too, right?
Absolutely. Research helps assess the market size and potential growth. Investors need to see that potential for future profit, that scalability. Solid data helps make that case.
Showing there's a big enough pond to fish in.
Precisely. And finally, showing you understand the competitive landscape and have a clear, unique selling proposition.
Shows them how you'll carve out your space.
Right. It shows differentiation and your potential to grab market share. All these things make your pitch way more compelling.
So wrapping this all up, the big takeaway seems to be that market research isn't just some box-ticking exercise for startups.
Not at all. It's really a core strategic process. It empowers you to make smarter decisions all along the way.
It's about deeply understanding your customers, knowing the competition.
And ultimately, seriously boosting your chances of success and maybe even landing that crucial investment.
So for you, the listener, maybe pause and think. What information sources are already available to you? How could you start applying some of these ideas to your own venture or area of interest?
Yeah, what would be your first, maybe one or two key research objectives? What do you most need to find out right now?
And building on that, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Markets change so fast, technology shifts. How can a startup make sure its market research isn't just a one-off thing at the beginning?
Good question. How do you keep it going? Keep it adaptive so it's constantly feeding into your strategy rather than just being a snapshot in time.